Welcome to the Tough Decisions Daily Show with your hosts, Dan and Danae Hanford. As entrepreneurs and real estate investors, we are faced with tough decisions on a daily basis. These tough decisions can either make us or break us. On this show, you will hear from highly successful people sharing their stories behind tough decisions that they have had to make along their journey of success. In every episode, you will be able to learn from the thought processes behind the tough decisions that were made. Some of these decisions will have amazing outcomes and some not so much. So without further ado, your hosts, Dan and Danae.
On the podcast with us today is Daniel Gefen. Daniel is the #1 international best-selling author of the Self-Help Addict and also the host of Can I Pick Your Brain, which has reached over 190,000 downloads and is ranked top 26 podcasts to listen to by CIO Magazine. He's appeared on over 50 top-rated podcasts and major publications. He was also named the top 25 most influential influencer by Influensive. After realizing the power of podcast, he launched his 5th child, Gefen Media Group. Most recently, he has launched his 2nd podcast, The Daniel Gefen Show. Welcome to the podcast, Daniel.
Woohoo! I'm so excited to be here.
Hi, Daniel, and thanks again for being with us. If you will, just get us started today with a little bit of your background, maybe fill in a little bit of the gaps there that we didn't hear in your bio, and talk to us about how you got started with your podcast and your writing and that kind of thing.
Okay. Do we have 3 hours, by the way? Because a lot of stuff. I mean, that's a long journey. Okay. So, by way of background, I was the nerdy kid in school. I was the guy that everyone said, "Shut up, Gefen." That's all I heard my whole childhood was just "Shut up, Gefen." So my voice got me in a lot of trouble, right? I got into a lot of trouble with my big mouth. But, fast forward, I'm now 34 years old and my mouth got me, married to a cool Californian girl. I used the gift of the gab for that. Clearly not the looks. And, I've built 2 successful companies. Sales has always been natural for me because of my ability to speak and persuade and build rapport quickly with people. And I've launched 2 successful podcasts again because of my ability to express myself. So to all those people who told me, "Shut up, Gefen," I would just say, "You shut up."
So I'm curious right off the bat here, when did you realize that this thing that always got you in trouble or always caused a problem was actually something that you could use to create a livelihood and to do something that you enjoyed?
Well, the truth is that I knew that my mouth can get me into trouble, but I also knew it can get me out of trouble. Right. So although I kind of got myself into a pickle a lot of times, it also got me out of it. Right. I was able to smooth talk my way out. How did I know it was going to, essentially, I guess, make me money and help people? I didn't. It just kind of happened when I started my first company and I got on the call and I just started, pitching people. It worked, especially if you're consistent enough and you're convincing enough. And the key for me was always being persistent. So I talked about how my mouth got me in trouble, but also persistency, which they called back then stubborn. People would say, "Gefen, you're so stubborn, right? You're so stubborn." Everybody would tell me I'm so stubborn and you never give in. And again, that was like a negative thing to them, right? And when I say them, obviously I'm talking about all the people that kind of wanted to suppress me and push me down. And what I found was that stubbornness is again what got me to where I am today, right? My wife of 11 years now, we've been married 11 years. When we first went out, there was no chance. There's just no chance. But I just persisted. And eventually she just gave in and married me. And now we're married for 11 years. Persistency is what, again, got me to be able to get clients for my first company. I remember I would call people every single day until they told me, "No, get lost, like drown in a lake or something," right? And there was this one funny story where I called this guy every single day for literally 8 days straight. And on the 8th day, he picked up the phone and he's like, "Daniel, enough. My goodness, you called me every single day." I'm like, "Well, you haven't said no." I said, "I'm thinking about it." I said, I'm busy. And I'm like, "Well, okay, so should I not call you? No, don't call me tomorrow." And then he went on for 20 minutes, lecturing me about how, it sounds desperate and it's too much and it's abusive and, it could be considered harassment and all this crazy stuff, right? And then in the end, he's like, "Anyway, send me a form and I'll fill it out and I'll sign up." And I'm just like, That's hilarious, dude. But anyway, that's not the end of the story. He puts down the phone. I send him the form. He sends it back to me with an email. Great, I got a new client. About an hour later, I get a phone call, and it's this guy again. His name was Gary, and it's Gary. And I'm like, oh no, shoot, he's probably going to cancel and give me another mouthful about being, too desperate and whatever. And so I pick up the phone. He's like, hey, it's Gary. Listen, Daniel, I've been thinking about things. I don't know if you know who I am, but I'm actually a VC. I'm a venture capitalist. I recently sold a company for £300 million, which is about $500,000 at the time. And no, not 500,000, sorry, $500 million, $500 million. And I really like your style. I think you're very investable. I don't know much about your company yet, but I think you're highly investable, and I'd like to meet with you and potentially invest in you. And my jaw was literally hanging down to the floor because this guy just literally gave me a lecture an hour ago about being too persistent. And here, my persistency clearly paid off, right? So if you were to ask me, like, the two things that people told me was a negative part of my character, which actually I've turned into my greatest strengths and my secret weapons and my best friends, it's my ability to express myself and my persistence.
Can you share with us, along those same lines, a tough decision that you have made that did not have a very good outcome? We're going to get to some of the good stuff, but I want to start with kind of a negative, if you will, on a tough decision that you made to get where you are right now that did not have the outcome that you were expecting.
For me, anytime that I guess I'm making a decision because I think somebody else has told me to do it, or because I feel like that's what other people want me to do, whenever I make decisions from that place, usually it turns out not good. Right? Usually that's where I end up failing. But when I go with my gut, when I go with what I believe is the right thing to do inside, because I feel like it's the right thing to do, that's when it comes out right. I remember I took on a partner because, people said, Daniel, you're very creative, you're very, outgoing, you're a great networker, you're great at sales, you're a visionary. You need to partner up with somebody to do all the delivery side, like to do the day-to-day grunt work and, that kind of thing. The operations guy, right? Because I had this great idea for a business. And so I partnered with somebody. And it was a tough decision because I've always been a big believer of that I want my own freedom. I don't want to it's very difficult working with a partner because then you've got to share the burden, and not just the burden, but you're also sharing, everything, the decisions and everything that you decide. And I'm very into having the freedom to make my own choices. And it went well at the beginning. And we did really well. In the first 9 months, we did about 6 figures in profit. This is a startup company from scratch. And I basically brought all the clients in. I, created the brand, everything, marketing, the whole thing. And this guy ended up delivering to the clients. And after about 9 months, he calls me up and he says, listen, Daniel, my wife, has been working with me and, she wants a third of the company. I'm like, okay, so that means you're going to own a third, she's going to own a third, and I'm going to own 50%, right? And he's like, no, I want you to dilute your shares so that my wife can come in. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. I mean, we have a 50-50 partnership. That's what we agreed on. And he's like, yeah, well, do you know what? We don't really need you because we could just hire a good sales guy and we don't even need you. We'll just pay a good sales guy, like, an hourly wage. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is my baby. Like this was my idea. I built the brand. I got all the clients. I've got the brand ambassadors. I've built the website. I did the marketing. It's like, I was so flawed. I was so it was like someone punched me in the mouth. Then he wanted to get a lawyer, like he wants to get his brother-in-law who's a lawyer involved. And it was just a massive mess. So that was, I guess, a tough decision that I made that I really, sort of look back at and go, oh my God, that was a complete.
Well, what lesson can we glean from that? Because obviously, we have other people who have talked about, partnerships that have gone wrong, and there's always a different lesson to be learned out of each one of those experiences. If you were to go back, what would you do differently? If you were to go back into the partnership? Obviously, I think right now you're kind of like, I don't want to ever be a partner with anybody else. But I think there's also a balance there because at some point in time, sometimes you need to bring on partners, especially if they're strategic partners, and to be able to help you get to the next level or help you to get from one hurdle over to the next hurdle. But what were some of the lessons or one main takeaway that you learned from that tough decision?
I think that having everything in writing was key because we didn't really have much in writing. Everything was kind of just a trust basis. I think I was a little bit naive at the time. And so I kind of thought, nah, this guy is a nice guy. He's a nice guy. And he is a nice guy. I'll even say that about him now is, even after everything that happened, I really believe he's a nice guy. He's a good guy. He's got a good heart. But money changes the way people are. Okay. And so whether you're in business with your wife or in business with a friend or a member of, someone that you know that you like and you believe is a trustworthy person and a good person, money has a weird effect on people. And so people act completely different when it comes to, financial situation. So when you are doing a partnership with somebody, especially if they're family, you want everything in writing. So that way there's no dispute. It's just there. The communication has been written out and here it is, right? The mistake people make is they say, oh, because I know them and because I trust them, therefore, and because they're friends or family, therefore we don't need anything in writing. I would say the opposite. I would say all the more so because you don't want to fall out with family. You don't want to fall out with friends. So put it in writing.
Well, and I think that along with that, it's much easier to talk about the possibilities and work out those things before that money is actually there on the table and ready to be dispersed or, invested or whatever the plan is. It's much easier to talk through those things and come up with an agreement and write it down. Even, like you're saying, people can be perfectly reasonable people. And then when that money's there on the table, it's like, oh, whoa. They just think differently. So,
I think another aspect of this too is, in writing things down is also putting in place an exit strategy for each one of the partners before there's an actual exit in the entire business. Meaning that if you go into business with two other partners and there's three of you in this business, well, what happens if one of you passes away, or what happens if, one of you decides that you want out? You don't want that person to be able to just go put these equity or these shares on the open market to sell it to just anybody. You want to make sure that you have a good, agreement in place and contract in place for that's been drawn up by an attorney, someone who's looked at it, who deals with these things all the time, because they're going to make sure that they put things in place that, hey, if they want out, here is how you get out. And this is, the first right of refusal are the current partners in the business itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So talk to us a little bit about a tough decision that you made that had a really positive outcome. Like it was better than you expected.
Oh, man. So about 7 years ago, I had a business it was a call center. It was my first company. And at the beginning, I was doing everything. I was the sales guy. I was the receptionist. I was the debt collector, the bookkeeper, the customer service rep, right? The whole shebang. And then I started to hire staff. And what I realized pretty quick was I'm not good at hiring. I'm not good at managing people, and I'm not good at firing. In fact, I remember there was one worker we had that we really needed to get rid of her, but I just didn't have the heart to do it. So I got one of my workers.
I've been there before.
Right? You know what I'm talking about? So I got one of my workers to fire the worker. I remember my wife was like, oh my goodness, come on, why can't you just be a man and step up? I'm like, oh, God, don't do that to me. Like, she's like, but you
Daniel,
should.
my wife is over here laughing because I've actually used her for that before.
Oh, man, right. Yeah, my wife's like, should I fight? I'm like, no, you can't fight. They don't even know you. You're not fighting.
That's what makes it so easy.
Right. So I just hate, I hate stuff like that, right? I hate admin. I hate dealing with people. I mean, I love people, but when it comes to business, here's the thing, because as an entrepreneur, I really feel like my business is my baby, right? I have 4 children and my business is are like my kids as well. Like I have now 2 businesses. So I've got 2 more children. So I've got 6 children altogether. And I really feel like they're my babies. And so when you hand over your baby to a carer and they mess up with the child, like, they don't take care of the child, it's, what are you doing? This is my baby. How can I need to trust my baby with you. I take it really personal. And so I remember at one point, this is when I kind of realized, oh my goodness, something needs to change. I had like a 65-year-old woman working, and she was on a call with a client, and she must have had like a bad day or something happened at home or whatever it was. And she just got very impatient with the client. And after her phone call, I was like, what was that? And she's like, oh no, clients being, blah, blah. I'm like, well, the client, has maybe a good reason to be upset. I mean, the way you were speaking with, and she's like, well, I think, and I was like, well, listen, this is not, and suddenly she just burst out crying. And I'm just like, oh God, I just made I was 20, I was like 25, little pisher, and now this 65-year-old woman is crying. And I'm just like, oh God, I can't do this. I'm just not made for this stuff. Oh, great. Right. And then when the proverbial, S hit the fan was when I had my head receptionist. So I had someone who was basically in charge of all the clients and all the staff. And she was like my right-hand person who was dealing with all the operations. She calls me up one day, and this is somebody who is like really bubbly, really fun, hey, she calls me up. She's like, hey, Daniel, I'm really sorry. I just can't come into work. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Is everything okay? Do you think you need to take the week off or something? Are you feeling okay? And she's like, I actually just attempted suicide, and I'm just not going to be able to come back to work. I'm really sorry. And I'm just like, what just happened? Like, what? Where did that come from? Even like, thank God she's okay today. For those of you wondering what happened, she's fine, but she couldn't come back. She needed like a good like 6-month therapy. Like, she just needed help, and I didn't see it coming. And my whole business was suddenly in turmoil because I didn't know what to do. And so I remember I ran home like a little kid, and I went and sat on my bed, and I basically put my head between my knees, and I was just like, what the hell am I going to do? This is like, she was running everything. I didn't know how to run my company anymore at this point because I gave her full control. And, I also forgot to mention that after that, on the same day, I get a call from the landlord, them telling me that I basically had 2 weeks notice because they were selling the building. So I needed to vacate and find another office. And I'm like, I have 2 weeks to find another office and move all of our equipment and all of our staff, and my head receptionist just quit. Like, what? And so I was literally having a mini nervous breakdown. And I went home and I called up my business mentor at the time. And I basically just told him how I give up. It's over. I can't do this anymore. Da, da, da. And like, he stops me and says, Daniel, I'm like, yeah. And he's like, have you finished? I was like, yeah. And he's like, okay, stop your whining, get up off your backside and go do something about it. And I was like, whoa. I was expecting like a hug or something, not that. Like, like, give me some sympathy here. But no, you know what? I didn't need that. I might have wanted that. I didn't need that. What I needed was a smack in the face and like, hey, you're an entrepreneur. This is what you do. You figure out solutions to problems. Go figure it out. And so I went for a walk, and I'm like pacing up and down, like, okay, let me think positively. Okay, what can I do here? And this is where my tough decision breakthrough came. And it was to outsource my company to one of my competitors, which was an insane idea, right? And like, nobody would ever think like, why would you do that? That's insane. But it was the best decision. It was absolutely the best decision. It was a tough decision because I was handing over my baby to somebody else, one of my competitors. But fast forward 7 years, the business still runs completely on its own. And I just basically make money every month doing nothing. I remember I went to a hotel lobby. I fired all my staff, got rid of the office, sold the equipment, took my laptop and my phone, drove to a local hotel and worked out of this hotel for a year with just my laptop and my phone. And I was just building the business. What I discovered was that I'm great at working on a business, but not in the business. I'm good at developing a business, but when it comes to like the nuts and bolts of the insides of the business, I struggle. So that was like very, very liberating for me.
That's interesting because I'm over here just kind of chuckling inside when you said that because, we always hear about, I actually just did a daily tip on our podcast about, making sure you spend time to actually work on your business and not always just in your business. Mm-hmm. And, I had never thought about it that way that, sometimes, people just aren't geared for working in the business. And sometimes if you can get yourself out of working in your business and just making sure that you're always working on your business, you can really take your business to the next level.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So can you share with us a favorite book that you have read that can help you make better decisions as an entrepreneur?
I'm going to be so cheeky. This is so cheeky of me, but it's called The Self-Help Addict. It's the book but the thing is it's not so, because the reason why it's my favorite book is because it's the one I wrote. It's because I read so many books on business and self-help. And for me, actually, the most I took out of was the book that I wrote, because when I wrote it, it was a journey for me. It was like I had to go deep inside myself, and I found myself, and I still do, by the way, I find myself saying when I'm making tough decisions, I'm like, but Daniel, you said in your book, I'm like, shut up. I know what I said in my book, but I don't have to really listen to myself. Come on. That's for other people, but it's not really for me. So, but it's like, no, Daniel, come on. Like, walk the walk. So writing my book was very therapeutic, and it's pretty much all about taking imperfect action and going from being a consumer to being a creator. So that's my favorite book.
What is one of the most exciting things you've done so far with the money that you've made up to this point in your entrepreneur career?
Oh,
most exciting place you've traveled, or item you've purchased, or extravagant spend, or something along those lines?
Well, I mean, we went last year for the summer. We stayed in a hotel on the beach, and we had a suite literally on the water. So when we would walk into our room, you would literally see the sea. You were surrounded by the ocean. My kids all had their own room, and me and my wife had our room. And it was so amazing. It was such a beautiful 2-week vacation, literally living on the beach. It was gorgeous. But you know what? For me, I don't even care about the extravagant stuff. For me, it's the little things. It's when my wife gets to go and have a pedicure, or just gets to treat herself out, and I don't have to. Do you know what I mean? I don't have to be stressed out about it, because I grew up with a father that was very stressed over money, very stressed. Every single thing that he paid for. I remember we were on vacation in Spain, and we went to a restaurant, and my mom and me and my siblings are sitting there. My dad opens up the menu, and he's like, "Oh my God, what is it? It's just pasta. How can they charge that much for pasta?" And we're like, "We can go somewhere else, Dad." No. We're here now, so we're gonna be here. And then I was like, "Okay, well, I don't mind going somewhere that's cheap." My mom's like, "Yeah, we can go somewhere." No, we're here now. And then a couple of minutes later, "I just don't understand how I could charge for this." I was like, "Geez, like, just don't take us here if you're going to complain about it, right?" And I made a promise to myself. I must have been about, I don't know, like 13 years old. I remember, I'm never going to let money do that to me. Never going to let money do that to me.
Well, it's interesting because, I have that same kind of thoughts on some of the things and some of the ways that I was brought up. And, I always remember my dad, whenever he'd come in the house from work, and the house would be too cold or too hot. He'd be like, "Why did we spend all this money, air conditioning the house," or, all this kind of stuff. And, now I'm in our house, and I'm like, I got it 68 degrees, and I don't care how much it's going to cost me to keep it at 68, and all the way up to 70, 72 in the winter months or whatever. And I didn't ever want to have to worry about that. I wanted to be as comfortable as I wanted to be, and not have to worry about the cost side of things.
Well, here's the thing, money comes and goes, but experiences last forever.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
it.
Well, Daniel, I really appreciate you taking some time to be on the podcast with us today. How can the listeners reach out to you and follow you more if they want to get some more information from you?
So if they want to hear more from me, if this wasn't enough, rambling on, they can go, if they're probably listening to this on iTunes, because if they're 70% of people listen on iTunes. So if you're on iTunes right now, just type in the Daniel Gefen Show. It's 1F, Daniel Gefen, and you could follow me. I do a daily show. It's basically me walking in the park every morning, talking to myself, which sounds a bit weird, but it's actually kind of cool.
The question is, which park are you walking in?
The local park. I'm in the local park. Now, the interesting backstory to that, by the way, is that I basically wake up every morning with tons of ideas in my head. And so I'm slightly bipolar, which means that I have very high highs and very low lows. But it also means that when I have an idea, when I have a thought, I need to speak it out. But I need to really verbalize it to internalize it. So what I used to do is I would go to the park and I would plug in my headphones and I'd pretend that I'm on the phone call. So I'd just be talking, and people would see me, they think I'm just yapping on the phone. Really, I'm just talking to myself. And one day I said to myself, that was really good. That conversation I had with myself would have been a great podcast episode. And then I'm like, why don't I just record it and make it a podcast? And then, of course, another voice in my head said, "Daniel, who the hell wants to listen to some guy talking to themselves in the park?" And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe there are some people
we'll see. Let's create a podcast and see what happens.
So I created it, and it's done really well so far. So clearly people actually, they like it. So the Daniel Gefen Show.
For those of you who want to reach out to Daniel, go to the Daniel Gefen Show and reach out and follow him some more. Again, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us, Daniel. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much, guys. I had a great time and appreciate it.
We'll look forward to having you back on in the future.
Yay!
Do you want to nominate a highly successful entrepreneur or real estate investor to be a guest on this show? Email us at dan@toughdecisions.net. Help us by spreading the word about our show with your friends. And also take time right now to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or your favorite platform. You've been listening to the Tough Decisions Show.